You know, we think we know what makes a truly great CEO, but what if I told you we've been looking at all the wrong things? There's a book called The Outsiders that completely flips the script on corporate leadership, and honestly, it's a total game changer. Let's dive in.
All right, let's just kick things off with a big question. If you had to name the single greatest CEO of the last half century, who comes to mind? For a lot of people, there's one name that probably pops into your head almost immediately.
And that name is Jack Welch. Yeah, the legendary head of General Electric for 2 decades. The guy was a rock star CEO, always on magazine covers, always in the news. And his track record? It seemed untouchable.
I mean, just look at the numbers. If you had invested just $1 with Welch when he started, it would have turned into $48 by the time he left. That's a compound annual return of nearly 21%, year after year. So that's it, right? Case closed?
Well, not so fast, because according to this book, the answer is a hard, emphatic no. The author argues that while Jack Welch was absolutely a great CEO, he wasn't even playing in the same league as the true masters of the game. And this is where it starts to get really, really interesting.
See, the whole premise of the book is that we've been using the wrong yardstick to measure success. We get distracted by things that feel important, like how big a company is, how famous the CEO is, or even just what the reported profits are each quarter. But these things can be super misleading.
So if all that is just noise, what's the real signal? What's the one metric that tells the true story? According to the book, it's this: the long-term growth in a company's per-share value. And this is key, how that growth stacks up against the rest of the market and its direct competitors. That's it. That's the ultimate test.
In this chart, this just says it all. The top line shows the 8 CEOs from the book, The Outsiders. Look at that. It's not just a little better, it's a completely different reality. On average, they beat the market by a factor of 20. That's insane. It makes Jack Welch's incredible record look almost, well, flat.
Okay, so who were these people? To really get inside the outsider mindset, we've got to meet the guy who was basically the archetype for all of them, a CEO named Henry Singleton.
Just look at this comparison. Singleton was the complete anti-CEO. While other leaders were chasing the media spotlight, people called him the Sphinx because he almost never gave interviews. While they were obsessed with hitting their quarterly earnings numbers, he only cared about generating actual cash. And get this, while other companies were constantly issuing new stock to buy other businesses, he bought back 90% of his own company's shares. 90%.
And what did this totally radical approach get him? Well, the results are just mind-blowing. $1 invested with Singleton in 1963 became $180. That same dollar in the S&P 500? $15. He didn't just beat the market, he created a whole new one.
So what was the secret sauce? Was it some brilliant new product? Some revolutionary way of managing people? Nope. It was something much more fundamental. A skill that's almost always overlooked: superior capital allocation.
Now, capital allocation might sound a little dry, but stick with me, because it's actually pretty simple. It's just the process of deciding where to put the company's money to get the best possible return for investors. And the book makes a bold claim. This isn't just a job for the CEO, it is the most important job.
Think about it. At the end of the day, a CEO really only has 5 things they can do with the company's cash. They can pour it back into the business, they can go out and buy other companies, they can give it back to shareholders as a dividend, they can pay down debt, or they can buy back their own stock. That's the toolkit. The legends just know which tool to use and exactly when to use it.
And Warren Buffett, who's actually one of the outsiders featured in the book, absolutely nails the core problem right here. He says people get to be CEO because they were amazing at marketing or a genius engineer. But the minute they get the top job, their most critical task becomes investing, a skill they might have zero experience with. It's a huge disconnect.
But here's the kicker. Singleton wasn't some kind of a fluke. It turns out all 8 of the CEOs in this book, from completely different industries, all followed a remarkably similar playbook. It was a shared mindset, a kind of radical rationality.
Buffett has this perfect analogy for it. He says, imagine you held a national coin-flipping contest with millions of people. Just by pure random chance, a few people are going to flip heads 20 times in a row. You'd say, wow, that's lucky. But what if you found out that 40 of those winners all came from the same tiny town in Nebraska? You wouldn't think it was luck anymore. You'd go to that town to figure out what they were teaching people. That's the outsiders. Their success is a pattern, not an accident.
So what was in this shared playbook? Well, it all boiled down to a few simple, powerful rules.
1. Per share value is everything. That's the North Star. 2. Cash is king. Forget about fuzzy accounting profits. 3. Keep your organizations lean, decentralized, and entrepreneurial. 4. And this is a big one. You have to think for yourself and completely ignore the noise from Wall Street. 5. Realize that sometimes the absolute best investment you can make is in your own company's stock. And finally, be incredibly patient, and then, when the perfect opportunity comes along, be incredibly bold. You know, when you look at all those rules, they all really point back to one central powerful trait: the raw power of independent thought, the courage to resist the herd.
Buffett has a great name for the force that fights against this. He calls it the institutional imperative. He describes it as the corporate equivalent of teenage peer pressure. It's that deep subconscious pull that makes CEOs just copy what all the other CEOs are doing, whether it makes a lick of sense or not.
And that right there is the heart of it. The outsiders weren't just good managers who played the game well. They were iconoclasts. They were rebels. They were absolute masters at tuning out all that noise and just focusing, with relentless rationality, on what actually worked.
There's this fantastic analogy from the philosopher Isaiah Berlin that fits perfectly here. He said there are two kinds of thinkers. You've got the hedgehog, who knows one big thing really, really well. And then you've got the fox, who knows a little bit about a lot of different things and can see how they all connect. Most CEOs are hedgehogs. They're deep experts in their one industry. But the outsiders, they were all foxes. They could pull ideas from different fields to see the big picture that everyone else was missing.
And that really leaves us with a great question to chew on, not just for CEOs, but for all of us in our own work and our own lives. Is it better to be the expert hedgehog digging deeper and deeper into one thing? Or is it better to be that adaptable fox, always looking for connections and seeing the bigger picture? That's the challenge The Outsiders really leaves us with.